4th grade, and I've heard they give a lot of homework, and you have to dissect a squid, and a sheep's brain in a cow's eye.
Oh my goodness.
And I don't want to do that.
Sometimes when I do school, I just get scared for math tests because they can be really hard sometimes.
I worry how people like my drawings and how I color it in.
Losing my family.
I worry about that my friends don't want to be my friends anymore, and they'll just hang out with other people, or sometimes I worry that my friends will get bullied.
Playing with my sister.
When there's a hard test or there's homework that you don't finish in time and you have to work really hard the last night, you think you can't get it done.
Falling off a tree.
Really bad storms.
Going to the principal's office.
I worry about if I lose my family or if I'm homeless.
Having a horror dream about zombies.
I'm worried about zombie dreams too. Terrifying. Hey, I want to start with doing a real quick little exercise that you've probably never attempted before, but there's always a first time for everything, and a lot of times that happens here at Emmanuel Church. So here's what we're going to do. I want you, for the next 10 seconds or so, to stop your heart from beating. I'll give you a minute. Easier said than done, right? Here's the reality. Your heart beating is involuntary, which makes it impossible to stop it. You know this, but you never have to think about your heart beating. You never have to think, I need to beat my heart for 60 times in the next 60 seconds. You slept all night and not once had to wake up to get your heart going again. It just did it, right? So the idea that we would make it stop is totally out of the question. No matter how hard we focus, no matter how hard we try, no matter how in tune with our bodies we are, it is impossible for you and I to make our heart stop beating. But here's the truth. Most of you, or maybe all of you in this room go, I don't even want to make my heart stop beating. That would kind of be a dumb thing to do. It's necessary for my body to function. It's necessary for my life to happen. I have to have a beating heart, so why would I turn it off? What we're going to talk about today is going to feel just as preposterous. What we're going to talk about today, what Jesus said not to do, feels like him saying, make your heart stop beating. Because Jesus said, worry not. In Old Testament kind of language, he said, thou shalt not worry. For a lot of us, that's an involuntary muscle. We don't even know that we're doing it. We just do it all of the time. We worry about our bills. We worry about our marriage. We worry about our kids. We worry about our job. We worry about what we're going to have for lunch and then dinner and then breakfast and what we're going to do next weekend and what's going to happen in 2025, right? We worry about everything, and we can be miles down this slippery slope before we even realize that we're doing it. We don't think about it. It just happens. And when Jesus comes along and he says, don't worry anymore, just stop that. A lot of us, without realizing it, also have this reaction in our brain. I don't know that I want to, because I don't know what I would do all day otherwise. Right? Our lives seem to function on a worry basis. We wake up, a lot of us, myself included, I wake up anxious. I don't even know what I'm anxious about, but I just have this sense of anxiety in my spirit when I wake up. And then we spend all day going through that. So when Jesus says stop it, it feels like he's saying stop your beating heart. So how in the world are we supposed to do what Jesus told us to do? I think it begins with not trying to really hunker down and focus on stopping something that feels impossible to stop, but redefining something. And that's something that we need to start redefining right now is life. What is life? What isn't life? And what is the purpose of all of this? It's a big question, but I think if we got clarity on that, how we interact and engage in that life might be able to change. So what I want to do today, because some of you are going, wait a minute, I was here like 5 weeks ago, and we talked about worry then. Did you forget? No, but we did. We did, right? You sat here 5 weeks ago, and you're like, I need to trust God with what's next, so I'm going to be present now, and I'm going to go on, and we were cheering church on that day, and then Monday came. The alarm went off. And we were worrying just the same. So I feel like this is one of those things where on a very regular basis, we need to kind of circle up and go, okay, let's talk about who God calls us to be and what he makes possible. Because even though this seems impossible, there is some reality that we can actually do it. So I want to review just a little bit of what we looked at 5 weeks ago. And it comes right from Jesus' mouth. It's in Matthew chapter 6. We're going to jump around a little bit today. Normally we don't do that. But I want to give you kind of the 30,000-foot view of what the scriptures say about worry, specifically Jesus and then a guy named Paul. So if you're going to follow along, Matthew chapter 6 is where we're going to start. We're going to start in verse 25. You'll remember this. Jesus said, that's why I tell you not to worry about everyday life, whether you have enough food and drink or enough clothes to wear. Isn't life more than food and your body more than clothing? If you are anything like me, that last phrase is weird. Because if you're anything like me, what we all do all of the time is we build this equation and we say that our life is the things that we worry about. And we put an equal sign here. Because it's so involuntary and it's so prevalent in our everyday life, we actually start to think that what it means to be human is to be anxious. What it means to be human is to worry. That's kind of our primary job. We just worry about things. So life is worrying about bills, is worrying about our marriage, is worrying about our kids, is worrying about the stock market, is worried about fill in the blank. And then Jesus comes along and he says, I need you to understand something. That instead of an equal sign between life and worry, I want you to put this sign, which if you go all the way back to grade school, you'll remember dealing with these. This is the greater than sign. And what my teacher told me is that the open mouth on the shark always wants to eat the bigger thing. And so what Jesus says is that life is bigger than your worry. It's more than your worry or what you worry about. Jesus says you are stunting life. You are limiting life. You're shortchanging life if you think the whole point of your day is to worry. Because there's more to it than that. Way, way more to it. So this is where we need to start redefining it. And instead of thinking that your job is to be panicked all the time, start thinking, what is my real job according to the one who wrote the job description? What's my purpose here in life? And then Jesus goes on, and we get to verse 30 in this same chapter, and he says, if God cares so wonderfully for wildflowers that are here today and thrown into the fire tomorrow, he will certainly care for you. So we hear all this. We hear Jesus say, life is more than your worry, and God will take care of you. So you and I have to face a hard question. Do we trust God? And every Christian in the room was like, absolutely, I trust God. Do you? Like, really? Every day? When you wake up in the morning? When you're laying in bed at night? When you're driving to and from work? Do you really trust God? Or do you say you trust God? For me, I talk a really big game. And for anybody that's here this morning and you haven't bought into this Christianity thing, but you know a lot of Christians, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Because we are really good at saying, we don't panic, we don't get afraid, we just trust God. And then you interact with us on a Tuesday. And you go, what happened to that big belief that you talk about all the time? What happened to that big loving Father in heaven who's going to take care of you? You seem awfully worried that you're not going to be able to retire one day. All right, so do we really believe this? What would our lives look like if we really believed that God certainly will? That's what Jesus said. He said he will certainly, not maybe, Not kinda, sorta, not he could or he should, he will. It's a certainty, it's a foregone conclusion that God is going to take care of you. Now, is that taking care of you always gonna go according to your plan? No. In fact, most of the time it won't. But God will take care of you. That's what Jesus says. So do you trust that? Think about this. I think sometimes we fail to understand God according to some relationships that we already have. I want you to think about your very best friend, the person you trust most in this world. How do you interact with them? Odds are you don't sit around all day worrying if they're going to be there for you. Odds are you don't sit around all day worried, are they going to judge you for that thing you said to them? I'm blessed to have a few people in my life where I'm learning I don't have to couch everything I say with "this can't leave this room." They're just good friends that I can trust. That's what trust looks like in my life. It's this kind of unguarded relationship. And what would it look like for you and I to live an unguarded relationship with Jesus? Because we trust him. Like actually, really, truly, practically trust him. Because what will happen is the more that we trust him, the less we'll worry. This is the conclusion that I've come to in just reading enough about Jesus and enough about the scripture, is that if we want to worry less, we have to trust God more. And you might be going, did you steal that out of like kids' curriculum today? Because that's pretty basic. I know it's basic. But we have a tendency to fail in the most basic ways as Christ followers. I know that this is lesson 101 in Christianity, but the world is full of Christians. This room is full of Christians that don't actually trust God at his word, that don't actually live every day knowing, present tense, knowing that he's got them. We worry and we fret and we get anxious, just like everybody else. Jesus says, don't be like that. In fact, when Jesus was getting ready to die, to be hung on a cross, he went back to this topic. He hit on worry a lot, but I think it's interesting that right before he's about to die, he sits his disciples down and he gives them one more little talk about worry, which is crazy. It's just crazy to me because he knew that they were heading into one of the most anxiety-filled periods of their lives. And so he sits them all down, and this is what he says to them. In John, he says, I'm leaving you with a gift, peace of mind and heart. And then he goes on to say, now remember, he is laying out that he is about to die, and he says, but I'm going to give you a gift. And even though I'm going to be gone, you're going to have peace of mind and heart. And the peace I give is a gift the world cannot give. So don't be troubled or afraid. Jesus, you remember last week when he bent down and he was doodling in the dirt? I almost imagine him doing this here where he bends down, but instead of a doodle, he's just drawing a line right down the sand and he's saying, listen, you have a choice to make between the peace that the world gives or the peace that I give. And here's the difference between the two. And they're nothing alike. Here's the difference between the two. The peace that the world is going to offer you is completely and entirely and eternally temporary. It's totally dependent on circumstances. It's totally dependent on you and what you think is best. So the peace the world is going to give you is a 401k, which, by the way, in 2008 could totally fall apart. The peace that the world is going to give you is a home with a white picket fence that you may not be able to sell for the same price that you bought it for. The peace of mind that the world is going to give you is a family with 2.5 kids that may or may not decide to have a relationship with you as adults. The peace of mind that the world is going to give you is a job that gives you a steady paycheck, but could decide to not do that anymore next year. The peace I give is not based on a circumstance or a moment or a thing or a place. The peace that I give is based on a person. Because what I'm about to do is going to show you that I am, without a doubt, the very Son of God, God himself in the flesh. And I love you so dearly, you can't even get your head around it. That should give you peace of mind and heart. And this is what Jesus goes on to say next. This is so cool what he does. He says, remember what I told you. I'm going away, but I will come back to you again. If you really love me, you would be happy that I'm going to the Father, who is greater than I am. I've told you these things before they happen, so that when they do happen, you will believe. It's amazing to me that Jesus predicts his own death and his own resurrection. And to make it even more crazy, he doesn't say, I'm going to die and then someday come back. He says, I'm going to die, and 3 days later, you could set your watch to it, I'm going to walk out of that tomb. I'm going to cook you breakfast on the beach. And then he did it. Exactly how he said he was going to do it. He told them before. He knew that written into human DNA is that we like fulfilled predictions. We like realized vision. And so Jesus says, I'm going to tell you these things before they happen, so that when they happen and you're in the heat of it, you can come back to the reality that I told you I would take care of you, that I'd come back for you, and maybe have peace of mind. And so Jesus walks out of the tomb, and in that moment, everything is different. Because we're not dealing with someone that we have to hope will come through. We're dealing with someone who has come through. So when that same someone says to you and me, don't worry, I got you. You're more valuable to me than little birds and wildflowers. I got you. You don't have to worry. You can have peace in me. I'm not even asking you to find a bunch of stuff to hold on to and hoard and put together. I'm just asking you to keep your eyes on me, and I will walk you through that storm. Because if I can beat the thing you're most worried about, I can beat anything. Now, 30 years later, this was so built into the teaching of Jesus and what it meant to be a Christian. 30 years later, a guy named Paul is traveling all over the kind of known world, and he's teaching people about Jesus, and he's teaching people what Jesus taught. And he sat down to write this letter to a church in a town called Philippi. And this is what he wrote. Listen to how clearly he states this in Philippians chapter 4. Don't worry about anything. Not some things, most things, or inconsequential things. Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Not some things, not most things, not inconsequential things, everything. Don't worry about anything, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank him for all he has done. Notice, thank him now based on what he's already done. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do in the future so that when you get there, you can look back on what I said and did and know that I come through on my promises. So you and I, sitting here a couple thousand years later, we come to this choice between don't worry about or pray about. And at some degree, we kind of go, was Paul paying attention in class? Because I thought Jesus said worry less by trusting more, and here comes Paul and he says worry less by praying more. Well, how do you begin to trust someone? You have to build a relationship with them. The reality is trust comes from a conversational relationship. There's an interchange. There's talk going on between you and that person, and over time, enough of those things accumulate some trust equity. And so Paul comes along and he says, yes, if you want to worry less, trust God more. And if you want to trust God more, talk to him more. Listen to him more. Be in communication with him more. You see, so often we become Christians, whether we became Christians 60 years ago or 6 months ago or 6 days ago, and we think that God is just going to, boom, make us trusting in him. Because some preacher told you that, right? And then we get into this whole thing and we go, this is not as easy as I thought it was going to be. And I believe that Jesus goes, well, let's talk about that. Can we talk about it? You see, there's a relational component to this Christian thing. There's a relational component to following Jesus. So Paul says, listen, if you pray more, you're going to trust more, and you're going to worry more. This is how he wraps this little section of his letter up. He says, then you will experience what? God's peace. The same peace Jesus gives, which exceeds anything we can understand. His peace will guard your hearts and minds as you live in Christ Jesus. You will have peace of mind and heart when you trust God, because God comes through for you. I don't know if you've ever been in one of these situations where someone comes up to you and goes, why aren't you freaking out? Why aren't you more worried? Why aren't you more nervous? Why aren't you more sad? Why aren't you these things? And there was this part of you that was like, I don't really know. I wish I could give you a super spiritual answer, but I just kind of have peace. Friends, you have experienced the peace of God that passes all understanding. Because the peace of God transcends our ability to get our head around it. And so God says, I'll give you that if you'll just trust me. If you'll give me your worry, I'll give you peace of mind. I'll help you worry not. If you and I want to worry less, we're going to have to trust God more. Trust him practically, trust him in reality, and stop talking such a good game. What we have in front of us is a choice. You remember when you were in grade school and that special someone sent you that special note that said, do you like me? Check yes or no. I think the Bible is like 90% that kind of note. It's God's note to us going, do you trust me? Check yes or no. So our choice is between trust or worry. I get it. We can't just turn the worry button off. We've got to kind of replace it with something, and what Jesus says is replace it with me. I know you can't just not worry anymore. I also know that you can trust me more. But it is your choice. We get to choose. And that's maybe the most incredible part of Jesus to me. Because he doesn't force it on us. He lets us choose. Now, some of you are going, again, I don't think you're getting this, Josh. Worry is like an involuntary muscle for me. It's like a bad habit. I can agree with you. I can understand all this. I can read all the verses in all of the Bible about trusting God and not worrying, but I can't help myself. Here's what I've learned about bad habits. The best way to break a bad habit is to replace it with a new good one. That you got to have something to put in that space in your life. And so here's what I'm going to challenge you to do for the next 7 days. And if it doesn't work, I was crazy, and you can move on to something else. But for the next 7 days, this is what I'm going to ask you to do as habit. Get up in the morning, and the first thing you do in the morning is have a conversation with God. The first thing, before your coffee, before your cereal, before ESPN, before any of that, you have a conversation with God. And here's how simple that conversation can go. You start. God, I'm worried about blank, but I trust you with that. And you might spend 10 or 15 minutes just listing out, God, I'm worried about X, I'm worried about Y, I'm worried about Z, I'm worried about W, I'm worried about all this, but I trust you with that, I trust you with that, I trust you with that. I'm going to challenge you to start your day by declaring your trust. And I want you to do it out loud. So you might want to get up before anybody else is up. But actually say these things out loud. There is power in verbalizing, one, what you're worried about, and two, who you're going to entrust it to. And so you might get up in the morning and someone's going to come downstairs and they're going to say, God, they're going to hear you saying, God, I am worried about work today, but I trust you with that. God, I'm worried about my kids, but I trust you with them. God, I'm worried about that thing that I got to be a part of and create a presentation for, but I trust you with that. God, I'm worried that I'm not going to have money at the end of the week, but I trust you with that. And you say that out loud every day for 7 days, and you might begin to experience the power of a God who can handle your worry. And you go, okay, that sounds good. I can give that a try, but just like I was a little nervous to make my heart stop beating, I'm a little nervous to stop worrying because I literally don't know what to do with my time otherwise. It's like a security blanket for some of us, isn't it? Worry. So here's what I would challenge you to do. Relabel your worry. Don't call it the thing that it is. Let go of your worry by relabeling your worry. So if it's worried about your kids, I want you to give a different title to it. And if you go back to the end of chapter 6 of Matthew, when Jesus is talking, he gives us the title. Tomorrow. That's what we relabel all our worries going forward. Tomorrow. That's tomorrow's worry. Today's got enough to worry about. And so I'm going to relabel it tomorrow, and I'm going to hand it over to the God who loves me and is trustworthy, and I'm going to go about my business today. And the great news is tomorrow will be today, and the next day will be today, and eventually you'll realize that tomorrow is like that closet in your house. You know the one. It's the only closet that has a deadbolt on the inside. It's where you put everything that you don't know what to do with, right? You just cram it in there and shoulder it closed and walk away as if it doesn't exist. And I think that that's what God has offered us. He's offered us a closet called tomorrow. And he said, put it in there because I got tomorrow. I need you to focus on today. I need you to trust me with tomorrow so that you can do what I lined up for you to do today. We got to stop dragging tomorrow into today. We got to stop dragging next into now and say, God's got this. If we want to worry less, we have to trust God more. So here's what we're going to do today. We're going to start this whole thing now because I'm with you. I was here 5 weeks ago too, and I forgot what I said about worry. So we're going to do something I hope that will kind of etch this in your memory forever. Everybody has a rock on their chair when you walked in. And at the ends of the rows are black Sharpie markers. And here's what we're going to do in a minute. The instructions are important for this. You have a rock. There's a marker that we're just going to share in the row. And this is what I want you to do. In a minute, the band's going to come out and they're going to sing a song that you won't know. And I just want you to listen to the words of it. And in those few minutes, I want you to just ask God to reveal to you the thing that takes up more real estate in your heart than it should. The thing that you worry about most. That might be a person, that might be an event, that might be a future moment. And I want you to identify one word that encapsulates that worry. And when you find that word, I want you to write it on that rock with the Sharpie. Just one word. Because they're not real big. So we're going to identify one worry, one word for one rock. And then when the song is over, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go outside through these doors. So when the song ends, these doors are going to open up, and we're going to go out to this place on our property, the pond. And what we're going to do, starting today and every day going forward, we are going to name that pond Lake Tomorrow. And what we're going to do is that once everybody's out there, I want you to hold on to the rock so that we can do this together. We're going to make a communal, public, out loud declaration about our worry. We're going to gather around the pond like this. So you can see here, these are the two exit doors. We're going to need to spread out because there's a lot of us. And just get around that pond. And then we're going to spend a couple minutes just praying, reflecting on what we've heard. And we're going to take that worry, and we are literally going to throw it in tomorrow. And go home without it. You're going to leave your worry entrusted to God. And here's what's so cool. We started our time together today by singing a song about how God is our rock. And so what we're about to do is say, God, I'm literally going to put this worry on you and then let you have it tomorrow. So that you can live the rest of your week going, I left that in tomorrow. And I'll promise you this, if you want to start worrying about it again, you come back and get your rock. You come back, but you got to get it. Because you know what's cool? You'll never find it. It's too murky. And I believe that's exactly how God takes our worry. He holds on to it so that we won't take it back. And he says, I've got this. There are words in the song that you're about to hear that had a huge impact on me when I heard them for the first time. And they fit so well with what we're about to do. They go like this. Carried on, but your heart was tired. Feared the worst and felt the fire. Lay it all down. Filled with all those anxious thoughts, all your doubts became your God. Lay it all down at the feet of Jesus. Will you pray with me? Jesus, this is one of those things where we don't want this to be a gimmick. We don't want this to be a fun moment that people remember throwing a rock in the pond but don't remember why. Lord, my heart, my prayer is that in the next few minutes you would be palpable in the air today. And that we would feel your presence speaking to our hearts, revealing to us the worries of our life that you have offered to take for us. Lord, we recognize today that you are a trustworthy God. And when you say that you care about us and that you value us and that you will take care of us in the future, we want to believe that. And we want to live in that way every single day. So speak to us through this music, speak to us through your Spirit. And Lord, as we write that word that reminds us of our worry, we pray that you would take it and that we wouldn't take it back. In Jesus' name, amen.